guys, it's Oberstadt. In today's video, I'm going to be using two palettes in conjunction with each other to make cohesive looks. I noticed when using the Wine and Only palette from ColourPop that this can be very, very dark. I also mentioned in my first impressions video that I would try and do at least a couple of looks with other palettes so that you can see how they work together. I didn't want to do something like excruciatingly dark. I did do a darker eye, but I think both of these would be work appropriate.
Hey guys, I didn't talk through this because my brother had just gotten in the shower when I sat down to film. The first shade that I'm using is called Royal Jewels from the Kathleen Lights palette, and I am putting that all over like my crease and my under eye area. This is the So Jaded palette. I have wanted this palette for so long. I finally was able to get it. That is a Ipsy X Tetris brush that I'm using, and that color there is called Jasper. And I wanted to do one more like work appropriate look and one that was more darker. Because this is such a dark palette, I wanted to use like a combination of both lighter and darker shades to show the versatility of this palette with using a combination with another palette, and that's why I did this the way that I did. And I am just working that through my crease and underneath my eye. Actually, I think that Jasper shade is really pretty, but when you pair it with the berry shade, you'll find here in just a minute that it actually pulls a little bit warmer. I thought it was a neutral undertone shade until you put a warm toned shade next to it, and then it pulls more warm. I'm sure had I used more cool toned shades next to it, it probably would have stayed neutral. Now into the Wine and Only palette, that is the shade Sip Sip that I am using there. It is the second shade in on the palette, and it's really a pretty shade, but it's one of those shades that is a matte with glitter, and I really do not like those because they're super sheer, so I had to build this up quite a bit. It does blend out nicely, but if you want it to be more opaque, you really honestly have to build it and build it and build it to get it to look the way a normal matte shadow would. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I don't like it. Plus, all the glitter fallout that I get from it just annoys the piss out of me. Now, into the other shade, that is Major Chianti. And that actually is a more light matte compared to the other matte shades in this palette. It is the next lightest shade in here, and that is a straight matte. This is kind of a crumbly matte, and it is super richly pigmented. So literally like one or two taps in the pan super lightly is all that you need to apply product. This palette is very, very, very richly pigmented that I found. That the pigmentation behind it was very opaque except for the matte with glitter shades, like the hybrid shades that they have, which was that Sip Sip shade and Grapeful. Those are a little bit more sheer, but the other three mattes in this palette are like kapow kind of colors. And I'm just pulling my eye out to make sure that everything is blended properly because, you know, when you're older and you have hooded eyes, and, you know, that is my more deep set eye, it makes sense to me to do that. That is a shade Cast a Chateau. It is a really pretty shade. I think it is what is like their Super Shock shadows. It feels like a Super Shock. I have a few of their Super Shocks. I have one that I bought like a while ago that when I got it, it was like super hard and chunky and crumbly and very dry feeling. And then I got another shade like 6 months later and it felt completely different. So I don't know if I just got the first one that I ever bought was really bad or dried out or old or whatever, but the ones in this palette feel wet to the touch. That is a Firma Beauty brush that I'm using. It is a dense shader brush, and it works really well at getting the pigment to place well, and then I just press over it with my finger to smooth it out. Also, when you apply your finger over a shadow, like say you put a shadow on and then you just press over it with your finger, it makes the metallic come out a little bit more. So if you look, it gives a little bit more of a shine, which I like. Now, I am mixing two colors here. That is Play to Wine and Mon Cherie. And the Moncherie shade is more like a grapey purple kind of shade, whereas the Play to Wine is more like a wine berry color. And mixing the two, they play off of each other really well because the Moncherie shade has like purple and wine colored like sparkle to it, whereas the other one has just red sparkle to it. And I wanted this look to be more bold. So that's why I mixed the two colors instead of just using one instead of the other. That shade is called Blanco from the Wine and Only palette. It is the lightest color in the palette. And, you know, with how dark this look is, it doesn't look that light. That is the color Fluorite from the So Jaded palette. And it's very, very, very sheer. I didn't realize how sheer it was until I went to put it on. And then it barely showed up, so I went back and added more, and it seemed to build quite nicely. So it's a really pretty shade, but it's very sheer. It's like a lilac kind of purple, and I think it worked really well with that lighter colored eye. And then just blending things together there. And then brow bone and brow bone. Now I'm going into the two liners from ColourPop. I will tell you what they are because I did not drag them out here to do this. I do tell you what they are here in just a minute in the next part. I also did on this eye, I added the Smashbox Always On gel liner in fishnet to the upper waterline, and then I used a black liquid liner on the top to define that a little bit more. And here are the two looks up close. What do you guys think? I think that these palettes work really well together. You could use the Wine and Only palette, the So Jaded, to get a variety of looks. I'm going to try and combine this with like the Raw Beauty Kristi palette too and a few others. So I will see you guys in just a second. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Let me know what you think down below.
So I ended up using the So Jaded palette with it today, and I think the funny thing is this eye here, the shimmers that I used on it are more sheer, but I think this is a really good companion palette if you have this to use with this. I will also try, let me see if I can get it out without something falling off my lap. I'm curious to see how this wine palette will work with this one too. This is the Fade into Hue palette. I just got this as well. I want to see how well it works with that, and I will even try using it with like the Raw Beauty Kristi palette and a couple of other ColourPop palettes to see how well it meshes with some of the other ColourPop palettes. I also used two of their liners. One is in Amethyst Hour, and then this one here is in Joyride, so I used the darker one with the darker eye. And I have my Project Pan stuff sitting on the counter, so I just used two black liners out of that for this. And yeah, basically everything on my face is part of the Project Pan except for the bronzer and the highlight, which are from Nomad. So, like I said in my first impressions video for this wine palette, I think this will work really well as a companion palette. I mean, you can use it on its own. It is a beautiful palette. I would recommend being careful with the shade here. There is a ton of like glitter fallout in the palette from it. Plus mine looks rusted on the bottom, and I set it on the counter and the shade went boop and like hopped out of the palette and landed face up on the floor, and there was glitter everywhere. And there's glitter from that shadow all the way even up here. So I do not like a messy palette. I keep my makeup as sanitary and as clean as possible, so that's just a personal preference. But I think if you have this palette and you're worried about the looks being too dark, you can mix it with some of the other ColourPop palettes or some more neutral palettes that you own and get it to work out a little bit easier. I tried to use a couple of shades from the other palette to work with this one, and I like how both of them turned out. This one is definitely more like easy to do, work appropriate. It's lighter. This one here is something I would like wear, but you know, everybody likes their own color stories. I do like berry and wine shades. Those are like the colors that I kind of gravitate to, especially with blue eyes. It makes my eyes really pop. So it's always been a color story that I like. Anything that's like a mauve or a berry shade are shades that I've always really enjoyed wearing, even though I'm supposed to wear like bronze and gold and taupe. stuff like that. So because I'm also very fair skinned. So I think that these will work really well with other, you know, the wine palette will work really well with other palettes if you have other ColourPop palettes or other palettes you would like to work with it with, unless you want to wear more darker looks. I think that it's a nice palette. I haven't had any issues with the products working. I do know that there's a couple of shades in here. One of them's a little bit more sheer, but if you use your finger, you can get it to be really opaque. You can also get your brush wet. And I'll be doing like a wrap-up video with like my thoughts and stuff on this palette after I've used it a few more times, and like pros and cons to the shades in here. And so yeah, there's that. And maybe eventually I'll have time to film a swatch video. So anyways, I'm RebeccaOberstadt. This is a combined effort palette look with the ColourPop So Jaded and the Wine and Only palette from ColourPop as well. Let me know what you guys think of these two looks down below. I did not record me talking through any of this. I just showed you what I was using, and yeah. So let me know what you guys think down below. I will see you in another video very soon. Have a fantastic day or night, wherever you are.